Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to this special edition of Newsmakers, the best of living here. I'm Fred Martino. Today we take a closer look at artists in our region. Whether they paint, draw, build, or photograph their passion, it's clearly visible in everything they do.
We got tired of snow in Colorado, and northern New Mexico wasn't quite warm enough, so we decided to come farther south. When I came to Las Cruces, we drove through miles and miles of desert, and then all of a sudden you come to this beautiful farm valley. So I felt very much at home, having grown up on a farm, and it was just beautiful with the mountains in the background. The Oregon Mountains are fantastic. The light in New Mexico is clear, and the mountains are sharp and bright, and it makes the colors intense. It's just a magical place. I think that being an artist lets you see the world in a different way. You see things that other people may not notice. You look for shapes and colors and beauty in places that other people may be too busy to notice. Being an artist is great for is sharing that with other people, to say, stop a second, stop in your busy life and look at how beautiful this is. Look at what's out there. This time of year in the valley is so fantastic with the chili harvest going on and the smell of green chili. There's nothing like green chili roasting. It's the best. For painting, I prefer painting red. For eating, I prefer green on most, but on enchiladas, I'll take red. I usually work from dark to light, laying in a lot of the shadows and texture in the shadows, but letting the shadows stay really glowing and transparent in those areas, not covering everything up with paint. And then after I get that laid in, it's hard to see when it's at this stage. There's so much dark, but eventually more and more light will be built on top of it. I use a few brushes in some parts, but almost all of my painting is done with a palette knife. So what that does is let me get a big, thick part of paint and drop it onto the canvas. And it also has some of that watercolor effect of what they call happy accidents, where things will blend in different ways or mix next to each other that are kind of a surprise. It just is something that happens. It's really exciting. And I like to leave some things up to people's imagination. I'll put little marks in there that are hints of chilies, but I don't want to make every individual chili and have somebody have it all done for them. I want the viewer to have a chance to go in and say, discover things. So, I didn't see that before. There's something hidden in there. We go to the grocery store and get our food and don't even think about where it comes from. So this is a way for me to honor that work. I've always loved painting people. I generally don't paint the faces on the chili field workers, and there are a few reasons for that. To most of us, they are faceless. They're out there working, and we almost don't see them part of the time. People who have had their families working in the fields really connect. They'll say, wow, that looks just like my grandfather, or that looks like my mom. And if I put a portrait face on, then that connection can be lost. So I think it's kind of neat that they like that. They see that I'm trying to honor the people working there, and it reminds them of something in their heritage. The last few years I've been able to paint full-time plus a little extra, you know, with I think I probably put 50 hours a week into painting and painting-related activities. And it's just such a great way to spend the day. I come in here and I'll put on music, or sometimes I'll put on a show. I watch a lot of PBS and turn that on and paint and just lose myself. The time just flies by. My website is jerisstudio.com. It's JERISSTUDIO.com. I'm working on each painting. At that time, it's my favorite, but I love sharing them with people. I love seeing it go to somebody who really loves the color and the subject and can enjoy it, because I want to go on and do the next one.
I got into metalsmithing when I went to Indiana University. I was planning on being an art teacher and ended up not being able to get any other studio classes except for jewelry. And so I took my first jewelry class and ended up getting 13 hours of jewelry design and silversmithing. And my teacher was a fairly famous metalsmith who had studied in Sweden. We did a lot of abstract work, and that's the first things I did were more abstract than the pieces that I do now. See the flash when it solders, which I just did, changes color. I have to do this one really slowly, warm it up slowly. These are the posts that I'm soldering on the back of the earring, and if I put the heat on it too fast, that post will fall over. Now I'm going to quench them. So I just quench them in this, it's called a pickle. That helps clean them off. I'll leave them in there for a little while, and then I'll polish them. You can see it went, that's why it's called quenching. I use mostly fairly simple processes, but I love stones because they remind me of the landscape, especially here in New Mexico, where you have all of the wonderful colors and patterns in the stones. And a lot of the stones that I use in my work remind me of that landscape. I first saw petroglyphs in 1986, and I was really intrigued by them as an artist in the archaeologic or anthropologic way. They were just beautiful. As I used them over a period of time, I became more and more interested in them, and so I wanted to know how old they were, and I wanted to help to protect them. One of the ways to help to protect them is to document the sites. I took that on as a volunteer thing. I'm able to do that for the BLM here in southern New Mexico. I go out to the sites, which is a real treat. The field work is always a lot of fun. It helps to go out many times because you see things in different ways. One of the things that I do in that is that I do tracing. So I take a photograph and I trace it so it's easier to see, because sometimes you can't see it very well on the rock. The process that I use is kind of complicated and it's not linear, but I can explain it in a linear way. Is that I see something that inspires me, especially the petroglyph images, which a lot of my pieces are based on. I'll take pictures, then I'll come home, print the pictures, and I'll trace out an idea. So I actually take my design, make a paper copy, and glue that onto the silver, and then cut it out. I do a lot of just pierced and sawed work, so I cut out the design, and then you polish it, you put a stone in it. I'm cutting out this piece. What I do, this is a jeweler's saw through the hole. I've already drilled holes in here. Then you tighten it up. This is one of the first processes you learn. Is if you're working on metal, you learn to saw. In some ways it seems laborious, but for me it's very relaxing. Once I'm done cutting it out for the first time, then I will take off the paper pattern and look at it again. So I'll keep that up with each one of these little bare toes until I have a piece, and then I will cut it out like this, and it'll be a very simple earring. The best place to find me is on my Sanity Silversmithing Facebook page, because that's where I put my new work. I think you have to find your own voice. You have to work very hard. You have to wear every hat there is. I don't think it's as easy as a lot of people, would imagine to be an artist. I think you have to be fluid. But you also, at the same time, have to follow your heart. If your heart's not in it, it just doesn't work.
I became interested in photography when I was about 14 years old. My mom is a really good photographer, and anyway, I'd follow her around and she would teach me about photography. And then my mom and dad bought me a Nikon camera, Nikon FM, when I was probably 15 years old, and ever since then I've loved it. It's just amazing being out here with my wife and of course with some of my best friends when I'm out here shooting. And then when the light hits and it's just right, there's nothing like it. Not only do we have all this beauty that surrounds us, not just here, but the Doñana Mountains, the Los Uvas Mountains. There's so much to shoot here if you're a landscape photographer. But everything is very close. You don't have to drive hours and hours to get anywhere. You can look up at the clouds and see what's going on and think, wow, it looks like it might be good light in an hour. And you can get to a spot and get to a place like this in a very short time. Listen to that. You have one pack of coyotes here, another pack over here. It's just a great place to be a photographer. The photo of Mourning the Dead, Kiki and I were hiking up in the Oregons, and we just came across this deer skull. And I thought, wow, that'd be amazing to have that in a photograph. It looked like it was going to be a great sunrise the way the weather forecast was looking. I found the deer skull probably a mile from where I took the photograph. set the deer skull down, and just waited, and actually got some night shots. It was probably 4 in the morning, hiked in, but then the sunrise was just incredible. And it actually turned the deer skull this orange color, you know, it was just really beautiful. And then having the organs in the background. So yeah, that's one of my favorite shots. My dog's name is Giggsy. He's with me a lot. There are certain times I don't take him if we're going to an area where it's really high brush and can't see the snakes. I don't want him to get bit by a rattlesnake, but because we see a lot of rattlesnakes out here, especially at night in the summertime. But honestly, the rattlesnakes, they don't bother me. It's the ants. At night, you can't see the ground. And I don't know how many times I've set my tripod up in an ant bed. Ants crawling up my pants, and you don't know it till you start getting bit. And anyway, that's always a lot of fun. The desert's a whole nother place at night. You know, it's just you, the wildlife, the stars. It's a magical place, it really is. We do a lot of shooting in Sierra de las Uvas. There's a peak there, Massacre Peak. Just a absolutely beautiful place to shoot. There's a lot of Indian petroglyphs around the area. The night skies are incredible. There's no light pollution from city lights around. We camp out there a lot in the summertime. It's just it's a wonderful place to be, and honestly, you never see a soul there. It's kind of a hidden gem, and that's west of Las Cruces, about 30 miles. My philosophy in photography, the way I try to shoot, is I try to make my final image look like it did when I was out there, the way I experienced the landscape. That's what I try to do with my photography. When somebody says, wow, I could tell that image was yours before they even knew I took it, that really makes me feel good. It lets me know that I do have my own style.
I grew up moving around the Pacific Northwest and Alaska and Latin America as an adult. And all along I was always interested in art, and I finally got serious about it when my husband went to Korea and I was able to go to UTEP and finish up a bachelor's degree in art. And then I finished a master's over at New Mexico State University. One of my most important influences was the work of Georgia O'Keeffe. She had flowing lines and really graceful shapes, and this is an example of a piece of plaster of Paris I carved for a basic design class. I started with the jewelry when I was taking courses for my bachelor's degree at UTEP. So that led me directly into the jewelry metal arts when I was at New Mexico State University later. During the time that I started with the cutters to do jewelry design, I did not consider myself a painter at all, but I did do very realistic little watercolors to show clients how their designs would look. This piece incorporates a little clay figure from Central America, 24 karat gold that I fashioned for it here, Bisbee turquoise, and an old turquoise necklace that I found over at the cutters. Well, I do continue doing the jewelry designs to this day, but in 1990 I wanted to expand, and I took some workshops. I took the Russian Alexander Titovets's workshop, and all of a sudden I realized I was going to paint, and I was more surprised than anybody. I painted mainly in oils for a while. Dripping Springs, Majestic Ridge are examples of that. And then I tried watercolors, and I liked both of them. Skylight Sea to Shining Sea are examples of the watercolors. About 5 years ago, I discovered outer space, and I just loved the thin layers and did Cat's Eye Nebula, Coma Collection. But those even related to underwater because I did jellyfish then, and Jeweled Elegance is an example of that, or Secret World 1 and 2. Besides the Cutter Gallery, people can contact me and see my work at my website, which is jo-ansmithart.com. Well, this is an example of it's never too late to try something new, because I was very settled into watercolors, acrylics, and oils, and then I discovered alcohol ink. I particularly like doing old trees and our mountains. They lend themselves to alcohol ink. And there are many, many layers. It's very interesting to work with. I find that I like it to be wild and loose, and then I like to go in with a pen and tighten up certain areas. This is the way they look when I first start out. I've floated them in alcohol, and they've moved around, and the red one is in about mid-stage. The blue one is at a very early stage, but that's what goes into ending up with something in alcohol ink. Well, I would say be searching all your life for what really works for you, and consider it something that you can do all of your life. But most important, that it's something that gives you pleasure when you're doing it, and learn to do it as well as you can. Forever. Forever.
Well, I prefer to shoot in the morning and the late afternoon, and almost in the twilight hours are really golden opportunities for dramatic light, and especially in New Mexico. That is just the really perfect time to photograph. During the day, there can be many opportunities, especially in photographing in black and white, because it does offer for you to be able to work with the contrast and the tones and the stark lighting, and sometimes get some very dramatic effects. We have lived in the Mesilla Valley since 1990, and the Organ Mountains are just a part of our fabric. They just inhabit every aspect of our lives to me. Wherever you are in the valley, you see them, so they just are such a draw that it's natural to photograph them. My style of photography, being in black and white almost exclusively, is again about composition and shape and form, and the tonal contrast, the subtle tonal changes to really try to bring forth what you would like for the viewer to experience, and then also for them to experience from viewing your work. I will carry 3. Usually a wide angle and the full range, wide angle and a mid, and a 70 to 200. I was very honored to be named the Artist in Residence for the Organ Mountains Desert Peak National Monument in order to carry on that legacy. I think, or I believe that the Friends of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, and as well as the Bureau of Land Management, are to be commended for developing the Artist in Residence program here locally. I think it will just return many benefits over the next years. My favorite photographs it would be really difficult to say. They're somewhat like your children, especially in my landscape work, because again, I really try to be mindful and contemplate why I want to take the scene to start with and what the scene is actually giving back to me. Probably my favorite place and my favorite photographs is my work and portfolio from Yellowstone National Park. And one reason that is I usually go in the winter when the interior of the park is closed, so there is very few tourists or travelers out at that time, and you can really get a feeling for the challenges and difficulties of the wildlife, and just the stark beauty of the park is just, to me, the most fabulous place that I've ever photographed. My work is online at my website, zone8.com. By living here, you experience so much, to me, freedom, the vastness, the creative atmosphere, the melding of cultures that have all evolved into making New Mexico what it is, which I feel is very diverse, creative, open to change, open to art, open to new ideas.
Thanks for joining us for the best of living here. This program is only possible because of our producers, Joe Widmer, Ralph Escandone, and Christian Valle. Subscribe to KRWG News on YouTube so you never miss a segment. And if you have an idea for the team, send us an email. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu.